When I signed up to do a TED Talk, it was months ago, and my topic is race. And I did not realize how apropos this topic would be this morning. So we shall see. What if I told you race is a myth? What would that mean? In order to unpack that, we have to define two terms, race and myth. First, what is race? Race is a frequently misused word. It's used interchangeably with terms like culture, ethnicity, nationality, and heritage. But these are defined from within, groups of people defining themselves. Race is something particular all on its own. Race is defined from the outside, groups of people defining other groups of people. The origination of race was based upon false logic. For centuries, scientists merely set out to prove what we already believed to be true, that race is a biological category. Carolus Linnaeus was one of the number of original anatomists to first officially categorize race through taxonomy, which is the way in which we categorize species of animals. He came up with 4 original categories, and they are as follows, and were put into the official scientific record in 1776. He said that there were Native Americans who were reddish in color, obstinate, easily angered and governed by custom. Africans who were black, relaxed, negligent, and governed by caprice. Asians who were sallow, avarice, haughty, and governed by opinion. And Europeans who were white, acute, inventive, and governed by laws. Subsequent modern science has never been able to prove his theories or method since. But race as a way of biologically categorizing human beings has been scientifically condoned since then and has led to various research projects from the strange, such as trying to prove that Africans are actually a type of ape, as you can see here, ape hybrid with Greeks, to the unethical and horrific as we saw in the Nazi concentration camps. In 1984, human beings began to undertake the project to map the entire genetic human code. In 1990, the funding and technology aligned and the mapping officially began. This project was called the Human Genome Project and was performed in over 20 universities and research centers around the world. In 2003, it was declared complete, and we learned a whole bunch of interesting things. Things like human beings aren't quite as complex as we had thought. And things like genetics don't answer all the questions that we're looking for. But it also gave us information that race is not a biological category. Craig Venter, head of the Celera Genomics and chief private scientist involved with the Human Genome Project, claimed that race was not a scientifically valid construct. Essentially, human beings are all mongrels. In other words, our scientific understanding of race as a category is simply untrue. Now, what is myth? In its most basic sense, a myth is a story, and that is a powerful thing. Human beings are storied creatures. We tell stories about our daily life all the time. We tell stories to make meaning of our lives. We tell stories about our children, about our lovers, about everything that happens to us. In fact, we rarely cast ourselves as anything but the hero of our own story. But that's another talk. Myths are a very particular type of story. In fact, when you think of myths, what do you think of? Area 51, Bigfoot, Greek mythology, perhaps even Mythbusters. In In order to understand the particular type of story that a myth is, you have to see what all of these things have in common. And that is that myths are stories that explain what human beings don't understand. So let's rephrase our original statement. Race as a biological category is a story that we tell to explain what we don't understand. So this brings us to a bigger question. Why? Why would we tell this story? And also, when did we start telling this story? Myths, like so many other things, are social constructs. Social constructs are things that make meaning in our lives. Human beings construct our society by coming up with things that we all agree are true in order to stick our societies together. They're the glue, and they're the social lubricant that keeps everything working. They're things like we all decided to stop at stop signs, or the 9-to-5 workday, or that we say please and thank you to be polite. These are social constructs. Myths, and the myth of race, is yet another social construct. We create them as a human group. They're true because we agree that they are true, and usually because they serve or served a purpose. In order to fully understand the myth of race, we have to find the original story. When and why was it told? Of course, we can't know the exact circumstances of the original story, but we can speculate and we can make a fairly educated guess. And in fact, the best way to do this may be to tell a story. Like the local author Patricia Lee Lewis said recently in a visit here to HCC, all stories are true and some actually happened. Here's a possible story to explain the origins of the myth of race. The Tova catastrophe theory, which is an actual theory of anthropology, postulates that 70,000 years ago, a huge volcanic eruption wiped out and reduced the human population down to between a few hundred to a few thousand human beings on the entire globe. Currently, to give us a perspective, there's 7 billion and change of us on the globe. That's a lot of human beings, which is also another talk. But in comparison, between a few hundred to a few thousand means that there was just a tiny, tiny fraction of human beings on the globe 70,000 years ago. 70,000 years ago, we also lived in small tribes. We were hunters and gatherers, which means that we lived off the land. We have become so few as a species that it is possible that our tribe has not seen another human tribe for as far back as our grandmother's stories go. In fact, this long ago, 70,000 years ago, there's no written stories. We live by stories. We live by oral tradition, stories passed down. They are told grandmother to grandchild in the firelight. We, our tribe, are the human beings, the only human beings. There is our tribe and the animals. In fact, many tribal cultures today still refer to themselves as the human beings, as a throwback to this ancient tradition. We have become so isolated for so long in this tribal time that we have adapted to the land we live in. Perhaps our skin growing darker to accommodate the hot sun, or our noses growing flat and strong to withstand the desert sands, or so our grandmother's stories go. During the day, women gather vegetation and keep the fires going, and raise children, and the men scout the land for animals to hunt and bring back to the tribe for precious protein and nutrition. Food is scarce in a hunter-gatherer society. This is a concept that's very foreign to us in modern times. There is a very realistic possibility that the people you know, the human beings of your tribe, will die of starvation. In fact, many people you know have died of starvation. And so it is essential that these hunters bring back the nutrition to feed your family. One day, when our tribe was growing and our numbers strong, and the hunters under duress to feed our many hungry babies, ventured farther than any of us had ever gone, deep into the jungle or the forest or the desert in search of game to keep their tribe alive, encountered a not human. This was a creature who looked human, sort of, but not quite. This was a creature who could not speak our language, who could just utter noises, who was perhaps overdressed in furs or underdressed, whose skin looked different, her face looked different, who appeared savage, who appeared scary, and who was clearly after us or after our game, who was scary. It is the other. It is the not human. And when this hunter returned, he describes an epic battle between himself and this creature in strange furs, this creature, a demon or devil in the jungle that our tribe has to contend with. It stands in the way of our very survival. It will take our game. It will steal our women and children. We must protect ourselves, the human beings, from the other, the not human beings, or so the story goes. Of course, the story is really a story about a scared hunter from one tribe meeting another hunter, another human being from another tribe who had adapted physiologically and looked different to somewhere else. It's a fish tale being told by a hunter who has to explain why he didn't bring back game to his family. It's the story of otherness and fear and a fight for resources and survival of the tribe he knows. Most likely, the myth of race originated simply from fear and a desire to survive in harsh times. It tells a story of those who do not look like us as being not quite human, so that we can protect ourselves from extinction. But when this story is woven into the social narrative and becomes an agreed upon social construct, it becomes malignant like a cancer, the results of which are littered throughout human history. War, slavery, genocide, eugenics, oppression, prejudice, discrimination, white flight, privilege, brutality, and riots. We see it today. The myth of race, like anything born of fear, is ugly indeed. But there's powerful opportunity here. By acknowledging that it is a story, a myth, a construct constructed by us, and only true because we agree that it is true, and only powerful because we keep retelling it, we also have the choice to change the story. To change how our society constructs race itself. And it requires no public policy or legal advocacy, although those are good things too. All it requires is that you notice where the myth of race is told in your life and your corner of the world, in your workplace or your classroom or your living room with your friends or your family. Notice where we are telling the story of fear or otherness or not quite humanness. And then you personally decide to tell a different story. Don't tell stories about other people. Don't tell stories that characterize different groups of people. Tell your own cultural stories and encourage other people to do the same. Let people define themselves. And then, above all, listen. Listen without comment to people's diverse stories. Don't tell them what their stories ought to be. Just listen. Because wouldn't it be great to tell your own story with the same respect? There's social power to constructing society this way, through stories. It's what humans do. In fact, it's probably the single most powerful thing you can do, personally, to impact the reconstruction of the myth of race. Make it your story. Thank you.